Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 21st meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Hayner,
Here.
Councilmember Bannister, Councilmember Griswold, Councilmember Lum, Councilmember Grant, Councilmember Ackerman,
Here.
Mayor Taylor,
Here.
Councilmember Eaton,
Here.
Councilmember Nelson,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Present.
Councilmember Renlawi.
Here.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The agenda is approved. Do we have communications today from our city administrator?
Yes, Mayor. I wanted to point out that staff's been very busy. If you look on the agenda, there are a number of communications about things that have been going on. One I would highlight for your attention is a memo on the administrative process for a draft resolution for approving marijuana licenses in the city of Ann Arbor. I'd also like to take just a minute to recognize and congratulate the Office of Sustainability Innovation. Last week, they were able to install, with the help of residents, U of M students, some members from the Energy Commission, and staff, solar panels on the roof of Fire Station 6. The result of that will be really offsetting the energy needs of that station and is reflective of a lot of work. Additionally, the Public Works had their first open house this past weekend. We had over 280 residents attend. It was very successful from our perspective. It was a fun event. People got to paint on the blades of snow plows. They got to work the arm on the solid waste truck, try their skills climbing in some of the equipment, and it was a lot of fun by the people who were there. Lastly, I would point out that the Citizens Academy, which was started a couple years ago, has just opened up for applications. So if you know of someone who is interested in that, that's a great opportunity for them to learn about the city operations. They can find more information about it on the city's website or contact the clerk's office. And thanks to Officer King for joining us tonight.
Thank you. We now have a brief introduction, a proclamation recognizing October as Co-op Month in Ann Arbor. If there are representatives in the co-op community, please join me at the podium. There are all sorts of ways to organize a business and all sorts of ways to achieve social good and band together to really to accommodate both, to achieve both. And one outstanding way of affecting and operating in commerce and achieving social good is cooperatives. And we are so fortunate in Ann Arbor to have so many strong cooperatives. Many of us have history with co-ops here in town, and I'm delighted to make this proclamation for National Co-op Month as a consequence. Whereas cooperatives are a unique form of collaborative businesses where members own, use, and run their own businesses, not for profit, but for the collective good of members. And whereas cooperative principles are operated according to the principles of democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, and cooperation among cooperatives. Whereas there are 40,000 cooperative businesses in the United States serving more than 346 million members in nearly every sector of the economy, including but not limited to agriculture, finance, purchasing, childcare, energy, utilities, housing, food, education, retail, worker, and more. And whereas there are cooperative businesses throughout Ann Arbor, including but not limited to the Intercooperative Council of the University of Michigan, the Forest Hills Cooperative Housing, Arrowwood Hills Cooperative Housing, Colonial Square Cooperative, Pine Lake Village Cooperative, Ann Arbor Cooperative Nursery, Stone School Cooperative Nursery, First United Methodist Cooperative Nursery, the University of Michigan Credit Union, the Huron River Area Credit Union, and the People's Food Co-op. Whereas October is Co-op Month, first so designated in 1948 and celebrated by co-ops throughout the United States as a time to honor the service to their members and their communities provided by cooperative businesses. Now therefore, I, Christopher Taylor, Mayor of Ann Arbor, Michigan, on behalf of the City Council and the citizens of Ann Arbor, do hereby officially honor the cooperative businesses that serve the Ann Arbor community and encourage city residents to explore the benefits available through cooperative businesses by proclaiming the month of October as Co-op Month in the City of Ann Arbor.
I'll just say something quickly on behalf of the Intercooperative Council. It's just been such a great community for me to live in a co-op. It's one of the only reasons I'm able to continue as a student in this affordable housing community. But I've also gained so many friends, so many skills. So co-ops are very important, and thank you for honoring us this month.
Yeah. I just want to say we recently celebrated 75 years of incorporation this past weekend. So we had co-opers from the past to the 60s and 50s come meet with us. It was really wonderful. And I think, especially given this time, something like this where affordable housing can be so hard to come by, it's really great that you are recognizing what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure is ours. Thank you. We now come to public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we would be delighted to provide it to you. Our first speaker is Ethel Potts.
Hello. I'm speaking about the Ann Ashley parking structure. I'm a little late doing it. You've been dealing with it now for some time, and I'm a little late to come in with opinions. But it's not finalized yet. You have another step or two to do. First thing you should do, I think, is make sure that developers provide enough parking for whatever they're building, and not excuse them for providing their own amount of parking. The second important thing is, I want to go back to the 10-year-old transportation plan for Ann Arbor. It was a very good plan. It heavily featured park and ride lots, and those have not happened. Well, we've only had a couple since then. But the AATA at that time volunteered to create and manage park and ride lots with frequent shuttle buses to all the destinations in town. Drivers of cars who have jobs or business in town or at the university would be able to avoid having to go through all the rush hours and have to then try to find a parking place in town. I think they would be very popular. This is where our funds should go, not to put more layers on another parking structure, but to build more park and ride lots out at the edge of town, to keep as many cars as possible out of town, so we don't have to provide parking structures for them if we keep them out of town. We have recently added a couple of park and ride lots to our transportation system, but that's not enough. We have something like 20 entrances to the city. If you're going to add more floors to our parking, it should be second and third floors on the park and ride lots. If they were there, I'm sure they would be popular enough, so we would be good adding floors to them. Are we serious enough about managing our cars? I don't think we're managing traffic or parking or cars very well in this city. Let's let's see how many cars we can keep from actually coming into the city. But the people who need to be here could still be here. That adding to Ann and Ashley, I don't think is the solution.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Blaine Coleman.
We are fortunate to have a lot of students from Skyline High School here tonight. You learn things in high school about the nation and the world that will stick with you for a lifetime. And one of the things you may have already learned is Lincoln's House Divided speech. Have you learned that yet in school? You'll like it. So what Lincoln said was, around 1858, a house that's divided against itself cannot stand. It cannot be part slave and part free. It has to be all one thing or all another. And this was an argument against slavery because he believed, and he was right, that slavery would gobble up the country unless the country stopped slavery from growing. Now, I can't see how the United States can go on giving $38 billion to a very violent, racist state like Israel to keep killing the Palestinian people. How the United States can keep doing that and still call itself a democracy. Already there are many laws seeking to criminalize what I've been saying here for 17 years, which is boycott Israel. A lot of laws have been passed in most states, including Michigan, that seek to give the impression that it's a crime to ask for boycott or other action against Israel. So if the United States keeps on supporting this violent racist state of Israel with $38 billion like it's been doing, I don't see how the United States is going to stay a democracy because they're already going, the U.S. and the individual states are already going headlong towards trying to criminalize this kind of speech, demanding action against Israel, boycott Israel, divest from Israel, stop giving military aid to Israel. It's very important that we say these things because this is the only way to get Israel to stop pulling the trigger on the Palestinian people. Israel has massacred thousands of Palestinians. Israel has shot down thousands of Palestinians just in the last year and a half. From March of 2018 to now. Israel has actually murdered hundreds of Palestinians from March of 2018 to now. And I urge you at Skyline to ask your teachers to give you a little more information about how many Palestinians has Israel killed and why exactly are we giving them aid?
Thank
Why are
you.
we giving Israel aid?
Our next speaker is Mojan Salabiasfani.
My name is Mojdan Savabiasani, and I have lived in Palestine and taught young people as young as yourselves, and I know the life of a Palestinian. Palestinians live in sheer fear of being killed every single day. Children are not in any way protected. The minute they leave their home, they could never come back. Parents could be arrested at any time. Israeli military breaks into people's homes without any discrimination, arresting people in the middle of the night and exposing them to horrific experience of being snatched out of their homes into jail cells. Israel keeps children in jails without any excuse for months and months and years and years. And a lot of times when they release the children, they immediately snatch them the next day, increasing their torment and their torture. Israel is a racist state. It is murdering a lot of young people just like yourselves, shooting them in the head, in the foot. Many Palestinian young people like yourselves have had to have amputations. You will see hundreds of pictures of them without arms, without legs, and imagine what life it would be like if somebody just shot you because you're an Arab and you lost your leg or you lost your arm. On top of all of that, Israel gets massive military aid from the United States, and as we all know, one of the major reasons for global warming is military activity and military expenditure. US Department of Defense is the biggest polluter of this earth and the biggest organization that is pushing the world towards more and more heated atmosphere. So there is a lot of reasons to boycott Israel, to stop US from spending billions each year on this racist state, racist Zionist state. And I want to tell these young people one more thing. You are all headed to universities, and you're all thinking, how am I going to pay for it? Well, guess what? Israelis have free education. And how do they pay for it? By your taxes. Yes, the taxes that you pay goes straight to Israel, and it funds their system of education, which is free for all Jewish people there, not for Arabs. But what I'm trying to tell you is this. We, as people who live in this country and pay taxes, we are funding an atrocious state, that's Israel. Let's keep the money here for the young people
Thank you.
here to go to school and boycott Israel.
Thank you.
At the very least, stop sending them military aid. At the very least.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Abrams.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Friends of Ann Arbor Wildlife and Nature, known as FAWN, and all citizens committed to nonviolence in thoughts, words, and actions, to please reconsider your decision to kill 150 deer this coming winter in Ann Arbor. Please protect the wildlife, including all the deer in Ann Arbor. There was a recent interview with Jane Goodall, the primatologist, anthropologist, known for her study of chimpanzees and animal welfare. She recommended to all of us committed to protecting wildlife on this planet that the way to speak with public officials is through our hearts, because words from the heart go to the heart. And that is my intention this evening. Each life on this earth has a unique place that helps us contribute to our ecosystem. It is only through our hearts that the killing and the violence will end. It is only through our hearts we will see the madness and justification made for killing in the name of metrics and safety. It is only through our hearts that we will see that every life is a gift on this planet, and we have no right to take its life away. It is only through our hearts that we can forgive one another for perceived wrongdoings. And it is only through our hearts that we transform perceived problems into nonviolent solutions. It is only through our hearts that we experience peace. And when we experience peace, we feel our oneness and our connection with all life, and we want to protect all life and extend peace everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Ramlawi.
Yeah, thank you. Just real quick, I was at the Eber White Playground ceremony yesterday, and it was a great sight. It was good to see the community come together and pitch in all sorts of different ways. And it was a sight to be seen, and I'm sure there's pictures out there of it, but shout out to the folks that contributed to that success. And glad the folks from the co-op showed up to receive the award and recognition. Co-ops are very important, and in so many different ways. You always get to see people throughout the country coming to Ann Arbor when they get together, and the historic contributions they have to the labor movement, to democratic values, to affordable housing, obviously, to a different way of living other than monetizing everything. So it's always good to see that, and I hope it continues for a long time to come.
Councilmember Grand.
Thank you. Want to thank Councilmember Ackerman for helping to facilitate our second meet and greet in Ward 3, which will happen tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the Bryant Community Center. It's a meet and greet with Police Chief Cox and some other police officers. So it's not just open to those in the neighborhood, open to anyone in the community who wants to come out and meet the chief and some other officers and talk about public safety in Ann Arbor. And I will be there. I want to also thank AAPS trustee Susan Basket for helping to facilitate that meeting as well.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate the proclamation of co-ops, and I guess maybe it's just because I live in Ann Arbor, I believe in the spirit of them. I was just kind of counting back how many times, how long I've been in the People's Food Co-op. Our kids went to Fumpkin over there at First United Methodist, which is excellent, and I've been in the credit union since the 80s. You know, so many good friends in the co-ops in Arrowwood. And it's especially interesting when you said in your proclamation that a co-op is formed not for profit, but for the collective good of its members. And if ever there was an opportunity to look to solutions for the affordable housing crisis we have here in the city, it would be the co-op. And Arrowwood proves that every day. And so I know it's not the kind of thing we can create zonings just for co-ops, but I certainly wish we could, because they're an excellent model and they really give people a chance. A couple other things real quick, some announcements. So November 6th, I know it's a couple weeks out, but November 6th is the first Center of the City Task Force public outreach. We've had many private but public outreaches to various groups who are involved in the process, neighbors and so on. And November 6th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the downtown library on the 4th floor. Everyone is invited to learn what's going on with the task force and the project, to share their thoughts on creating a commons in the center of the city, and also to stay in contact, in touch with us, to sign up, to continue to give your input and continue to be involved in the process. And so everyone is welcome to that. November 13th, there's also a A2 Carbon Neutrality Town Hall, and that's from 5:30 to 7 at the Cobblestone Farm. And I know that this is on a lot of people's minds, and there's the county passed a resolution of concern and action over climate action, and I know the city's been considering the same, and so that might be a good opportunity to get out there and listen and learn and also share. Thank you.
Further communication from Councilmember Nelson.
I just want to echo praise for our Public Works Department for the open house that they put on Saturday. My kids and I went, and we had a fabulous time. I mean, it really was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And sort of along the lines of what Councilmember Ramlawi said, my own kids went to Eber White, and so my husband and I helped work on the playground last week. And I wanted to give a shout out to our sustainability department, because my understanding is that Eber White got one of the Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grants to help build that playground. So that the city this week, I saw a couple examples of the city working together to make some really good things happen. Thanks.
Councilmember Griswold. Councilmember Griswold.
Yes, I want to report on 3 things. The first one is, a week and a half ago, I went to a Vision Zero conference in New York. My children paid for it. The city did not. And I want to say that I was treated like a celebrity. And I believe the reason is that there were people from the East Coast and people from the West Coast, but I actually wore my U of M jacket. And the fact that someone from the car capital of the world was interested in pedestrian safety was of interest. I learned a lot at this conference, and I'm hoping to have a community conversation about this in the near future so that we can educate the public and also gather information about what the public considers priorities. Number 2, I found it interesting that an article in the New York Times, the headline was, "In Ann Arbor, the student newspaper is the only newspaper." The same weekend, MLive had an article by Ryan Stanton about the University of Michigan students taking part in a solar panel installation on top of our fire station. So obviously, we have more than one newspaper in Ann Arbor, and I just want to thank Ryan Stanton. I know he has a lot to cover, and he's only one reporter. The third thing is, in the packet, on Legistar at least, under the Council Policy Committee agenda for tomorrow is a copy of the letter that was sent by the city administrator to our local state representatives stating support for the state crosswalk law from council. And I can talk at break if anyone wants more information about that. Thank you.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Bannister.
I had a couple. I just wanted to give a thank you to Chief Cox and his 3 officers who came out to Arrowwood last Wednesday night for our community meeting there. It was a great meeting. Thanks to the Arrowwood people, Rebecca and James Daniel, for organizing that, and also Chief Cox for coming out and meeting everyone, reminding us that police officers are human too, and we should all say hi to them and reach out. I also want to thank Missy Stoltz and the Office of Sustainability and Innovation and the U of M students who helped us put solar panels on the fire station down by Briarwood last Friday. They worked Thursday and Friday, and so now that fire station will be carbon neutral for the most part, and all for only $74,000 in solar panels. So that was another big success story. And then lastly, I just want to remind everyone, you're all invited to join the Old Fourth Ward Association tomorrow night from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., where Councilmember Hayner and I will be there, and we'll be talking with the group about zoning issues, parking issues, and short-term rentals. And the public is welcome to join us at St. Andrew's Church on North Division. Thank you.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Ackerman.
In 2 weeks, the Ann Arbor Public Schools District will be heading to the polls on November 5th. Please don't forget to vote. These November odd-year elections get low turnout. The bond proposal is for $1 billion with a B. You can learn more at vote411.org or by visiting a2schools.org/2019 bond. Thanks.
Further communication from council. I have a couple of nominations. I'd like to request confirmation of the following appointments that were presented to the City Council at the October 7, 2019 regular session meeting. To the Ann Arbor Public Art Commission, Peggy Weir. To the Local Officers Compensation Commission, Juliet Pressel. To the Downtown Development Authority, Alexandra Dyke. To the Historic District Commission, Catherine Fortinier. My apologies. And to the Elizabeth Dean Fund, Elizabeth Collins. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, second by Councilmember Lum. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved. I also have consideration for, at our next meeting, I believe. Is that for this meeting or this? Thank you. Next meeting, to the Public Market Advisory Commission, Helen Chandler. We now have before us the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? The consent agenda moved by Councilmember Amlawi, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Lum.
I'd like to pull CA4, please.
CA4. Further discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Hayner.
I'd just like to say I'm glad to see CA6 that we have before us a collective bargaining agreement with the fire department, and I hope everyone's satisfied with that, and I assume they would be, or it wouldn't be coming to us, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone's service in those areas.
Councilmember Griswold.
I just want to point out CA7, a resolution to accept a sidewalk easement at Narrow Gauge Nature Area. And that will allow a sidewalk to be put in a school walk zone area. It's actually city property, and hopefully that sidewalk will be put in this fall.
Councilmember Ackerman.
I want to say thanks to all the work on CA3. This is the first time we'll be releasing money from our Affordable Housing Fund with new tax dollars that come to us through the Community Mental Health Millage. It's an exciting opportunity and appreciate the partnership with Avalon Housing.
Further discussion of the consent agenda? All in favor of the consent agenda with the exception of CA4? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda with the exception of CA4 is approved with 11 council members present, all voting the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA2, CA5, and CA7. CA4, resolution to increase community service authorized staffing level fiscal year 20 in the amount of $55,296, moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of CA4. Councilmember Lum.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is the resolution to increase community services authorized staffing level by 1 FTE. For fiscal year '20, we added 14 full-time employees to the city budget. And over the last 3 years, we've added 30 FTEs. Yes, 30. That is a huge number and new full-time city employees and a significant permanent structural cost commitment. It roughly represents $3 million a year additionally. Now, here we are, just 3+ months into this fiscal year, and we're being asked to add yet another full-time permanent employee. Adding FTEs during the year and outside of the budget process is poor budget discipline at any point during the year, and it's especially poor process when we're just 3.5 months into the fiscal year. We rarely used to do it. Now it seems we do it frequently. Instead of a firm binding document, the budget has become a suggested starting point that council just adds to during the year. Emergencies are one thing, but adding resources for normal business activities this soon into the fiscal year is not the kind of fiscal responsibility I believe we need to maintain. We've significantly ramped up spending and resources for the Sustainability Office and climate action programs the past couple of years. What was an expenditure budget of roughly $400,000 or so 3 years ago is now a $1.8 million spending budget and an office with 5 full-time employees. We added $880,000 in new spending and another FTE in this year's budget for climate action programming, and that was largely based on the 5-year plan we reviewed in May, a plan we all applauded for its thoroughness. Now we're just 3+ months into the fiscal year, and we're told we need to amend that budget to add another community engagement specialist shared between the Sustainability Office and the Building Department. Even though we already have 1 community engagement specialist in the Sustainability Office, and even though the fiscal year '20 budget already added 3 extra people in the Building Department and 1 in the Sustainability Office. Anyway, I'm sure this item will pass, and I suspect I'll be the only person to vote no. My colleagues will likely say amending the budget is okay and not a big deal, especially when it's for climate action programming. I just do not agree. It doesn't matter what the purpose is. I believe amending the budget 3+ months into the year for a non-emergency, normal business item demonstrates a lack of budget discipline and compromises our annual budgeting process. So I will be voting no on CA4, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The expense for this is going to be split between sustainability and the construction fund. And I also agree with what Councilmember Lum is saying about the budget. The way that we treat the budget, it seems kind of flexible. And you know, it's a big book. Like, I carry it around a lot. I go through it. And there's a lot in there. And we all look at it and we all read it and we all commit to it. And so I may be the only person voting against this for that reason alone. But the other reason I might is because the construction fund finds itself with a positive fund balance. And then when we talk to folks in community services, especially in the building trades and so on, and we reach out to these communities and we ask them, well, do you want us to lower your revenues next year, or do you want more service? And they say they want more service. And so that's great. And I think that's great that the city's going to provide that service. And I think it's good for the builders and developers and so on when they can have timely inspections and timely plan review and so on. And that's great. But I'm not so sure that they knew that they were going to get a sustainability person. And so, that's just kind of my half reason for not really loving this option here. So I just wanted to share that with everybody, and I think that some of the big low-hanging fruit is to be had in making improvements to our current rental stock in the city, making sure that new houses and new developments are built in ways that are future-proofed and that there is using as little energy as possible. That should be our goals for sure. And so that's why the other half of that is good for me. I think that it's important that we get that message out. I'm not certain this is the greatest way to do it, but I do believe it is a way to do it. And that's important too. So this is sort of one of those flip of coins, but I really don't like the budget discipline on this object. Thank you.
Councilmember Amlawi.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, and thanks to my colleagues for outlining pretty much the same concerns I have with this. We're using the county mental health millage in ways now that are not what I feel comfortable spending them in. These inspections, this permitting for rentals and all this needs to come through the construction fees and the permit fees, and it should be baked in to the costs that that department has. So perhaps the staff can help me better understand why there is a necessity to split this 50-50, and why doesn't it all just come from the construction and permit, fund?
Good evening. Council Mayor, I'd love to take a shot at starting and answer that, and maybe discussing a little bit why this is in front of you. The program itself is one that was started through the Sustainability Office and is something that the entire staff feels could move the needle as far as sustainability in the community. How the rental properties and how building construction is done in the city has a significant impact on energy efficiency and sustainability within the city. During our discussions between the two offices, and we admit, Councilwoman Love, that this was not something we discussed in great detail prior to the budget this year, something we feel strongly about, and if not now, probably something we will bring forward with the budget next year. But felt it was important enough to start the discussion now and that we were ready to discuss it. It's part of the adopted sustainability plan and something that we feel, if we're going to start to induce these discussions or have these discussions with the building and rental community, is something that we want a dedicated staff person for. I can let Dr. Stultz talk about the program itself, but in our discussions with Bragg and with WA3 and the Apartment Association, one of the things they've always said to us is if we're going to enact additional requirements on them, additional responsibilities, or additional requirements as far as inspections or certifications for rental or building, is that there be dedicated staff or dedicated resources there available to them to help them through that process. So the program has been established as part of the strategy. It's something we feel is important. And if we're going to go forward with it, it was something we felt was reasonable to reach out to now and talk about adding that staff resource for the community as opposed to waiting till the budget. We'd be glad to discuss it when the budget comes up next year. It will be something that we would be glad to bring forward at that point. We have never brought forward a out-of-cycle FTE since I've been here. I don't think many of the departments have. We understand the importance of that, but it's something that is defined and that we want to get started now. So we felt it was worth the discussion and potentially worth bringing on the additional FTE now as opposed to waiting till next fiscal year. So that's why we're here as far as the building and rental part of it or community services, is we feel if we're going to start this program and start to enact this program, that having that dedicated resource is important. If it's something that council would rather wait till next year to start the discussion on, we'd be glad to do that. We feel the program is defined, and if we're going to get started on it, that there was really no reason not to have that discussion about the FTE now.
I appreciate the sense of urgency. We've heard that from all our, I have hopefully 30 seconds or something left. We appreciate the urgency. We don't want to wait a year. My main concern is why isn't it not coming from your department 100%? I mean, if these builders
I can answer
This, we got a surplus in that account, let's spend it on the programs that it administers.
Understood.
Why does it gotta come from the county health millage money? I mean, that to me is a sticking point.
I can understand that. The construction fund can only be used for items directly related to permit issuance or inspection. They can't be used for education, they can't be used for a lot of different things that this program involves. We are taking our best guess at this point, without actually having started the program, that the split between the staff person's time will be approximately 50% related to permitting, inspection, and building and rental related activities that come in through a permit fee. Only that involvement can come out of the construction fund. The rest of the involvement from sustainability, as far as education, outreach, and other things, can't be paid for through the construction fund. So that would be a violation of Bolt and a lot of other things that go into this. So we're taking our best guess right now that this staff person's time will be split 50-50 equally. There's a very good chance as the program evolves, we'll come back and recommend that there's a different division of time between the two resources. But right now, at our best estimate, it's going to be about 50-50 between the two items.
Councilor Rumlow,
Yeah.
just very quickly, the budget from sustainability isn't from the mental health millage. The budget savings that we have is actually from the general fund, and it's because of two reasons. One, it's taken a very long time to get through our hiring process, and so we've sat on a lot of extra budget. And the second is because we anticipated hiring at a level, and we actually brought people in slightly under that, so we have budget savings. So none of it is actually from the mental health millage.
Councilmember, I'm sorry.
It's in the resolution, but I apologize.
It says millage in the resolution?
Yeah.
I apologize, that's our mistake then.
It's in the resolution, so that's why-
Probably my bad.
Okay, that is not true in terms of how we have our budget savings. I can show you, I'll attach this for everyone. Our savings, we worked with the finance department that actually tracks where all the money savings is coming from, so our apologies.
All right, well, thanks for being here to answer this.
Yeah, apologies.
Councilor Ackerman.
That spoke to it. If these dollars aren't coming, would you recommend striking the whereas clause that refers to the county mental health millage?
I don't have a problem with that, but I would look to our acting city administrator who happens to be our CFO to confirm that that's fine.
And I'm trying to pull over the language.
It's
Here.
this last whereas officials.
Just the part from their 50%, the county mental health millage, because we could just say from our budget.
We could strike county health millage and put Office of Sustainability in.
And just as back history while we're pulling that up, I'd say we started the engagement, Councilmember Lum, with our real estate folks, with our affordable housing colleagues, with our area apartment association folks, as part of the work plan, like normal process. And in that, what happened is it became very, very clear that there were more ideas than we even thought of that were kind of emerging. So that's why we realized we just didn't have the capacity. So I thought I'd share that.
Councilor Ackerman.
So I'm gonna make a motion that in the final whereas clause, which reads, whereas the Office of Sustainability has funding available in the anticipated fiscal year 2021 budget for their 50% share of this position in the county mental health millage, that we strike in the county mental health millage.
Seconded by Councilor Smith. Is that friendly to the body? Friendly. Councilmember Ackerman, you still have the floor.
I'm okay for now, thank you.
Councilmember Grand.
Thank you. We heard from Councilmember Lum that, this isn't an emergency. I think there were a bunch of young people that showed up about a month ago that said that this is an emergency. And we have a lot of people from the community who are trying to get us to declare a climate emergency. But to me, climate emergency is pretty empty if you don't take actions to support it. I would rather see us doing this than we can declare a climate emergency also, but I would rather see us taking substantive action. When I think about, we want to be taking actions, of course, and leading as a city, but when we think about where the gains are going to come from, we are such a small part as a city, and this is an enormous part of where our energy is being used. It seems like a small amount of money to go after those kinds of savings in terms of carbon emissions and in terms of energy savings. So I really do support this effort. In terms of process also, it does take 8 votes to amend the budget. So I think that's a fairly high threshold, and that's why we don't see these kinds of things coming forward, because it's not easy to get 8 votes for this body, but you certainly have mine. It's an excellent program, and if for some reason it doesn't go through tonight, I look forward to supporting it in the budget in a few months, but hopefully we can act sooner, because it doesn't make sense to wait.
I'm going to support this wholeheartedly. I don't think we need to limit our good ideas to December, January, February, March, April before the budget. If we have good ideas that germinate in the spring, in the summer, then I think, and we're able to take action on those good ideas in this time frame, then I think it makes a great deal of sense for us to address them by amending the budget reasonably where we have the funds to do so. And here we plainly do. In my view, this flexibility, this is not a bug, this is a feature. This is an example of government that is responsive and thoughtful and proactive, and it's something that we should be doing and that we should be proud of. Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. So I understand where the funding is coming within this fiscal year. Where will the funding for this position come from next year?
Yeah, well, construction fund,
Yeah,
right? your
for
question?
for us, the availability of the construction fund is recurring. So
But that's
we can
50% of it.
Yeah, at a minimum, or probably at a maximum, but yes, we can support this for years to come.
And then from our office, we have sustained savings because salaries are lower than what we budgeted when we went out to hire for our new positions. So we will have a modest budget ask in the next fiscal year to cover, but it looks like that'll be less than $20,000. The rest is through savings.
Thank you.
Councilor Lum.
Thanks. Again, I just want to reiterate, this is all about budget discipline. And again, we're 3 to 4 months into this fiscal year. Here's a budget amendment. This used to be rare, trust me when I say that. And now it's not unusual to see 8 vote requirements to amend the budget. And I think that this is poor process under any circumstance, and especially so in an area where we have already added a huge amount of resources. This year, between building and rental and sustainability offices, as I said, we've added in the fiscal year 20 budget 4 positions. 3 in building rental and 1 in the sustainability office. And again, this is, if we're talking about adding police officers, I remind my colleagues about budget discipline. And, you can basically make a case for you name the program of service. And, because we hear from lots of people for lots of things. And I just think, it's budget discipline 101 for me, and this doesn't cut it, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Hayner, then let me suggest that we call it a day.
Yeah, thank you. These were questions, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak again. So because we're budgeting for 2021, is this a 2-year contract, or is this an ongoing hire? I know, but I mean,
We anticipate this being a recurring position.
so it's a perpetual position?
It would be.
Okay. So perhaps briefly, you could enlighten us. Are we going to get our green sheet out of this like we've been talking about? For those who don't know, when I talk about a green sheet, it's my fervent wish that our inspectors would have a sheet when they go to these housing inspections, the rental inspections especially, that gives them a checklist of energy efficiency things to be looking for. And I know they already do. You have to have stops and drafts and windows and storms and screens and all that. But if we talked about some additional things and suggestions that could be made, and we may have to be making legislation around this to say, hey, this type of zoning requires these things now moving forward. And I fully anticipate that we will be doing that. So is this that kind of
Yeah.
person?
Yeah, so this person, there's 2 kind of things I think it's useful, at least the way we've conceptualized this position. One is we have things in the work plan that are clearly identified. The green rental housing is one. And that is when you're doing inspections, right? Are you up to certain standard and cuff? There's work with our realtors in terms of selling homes and making sure that we know how efficient those homes are when they go on the market so people buy and can understand. So there's kind of the things we've already thought through, but the thing is we need to do that in partnership, right, with the end users that we're going to be engaging, whether that's the building community, the development community, the real estate community, et cetera. So this person will literally be engaging with them and creating those programs. And then there are the things we haven't even thought of. right? The things that kind of emerge organically. As an example, in sitting down with the realtors a few weeks ago, they offered to help us develop sustainability messaging for anyone looking to buy in Ann Arbor. Right? That's a great idea, but we just didn't have the capacity at the moment to do that. So this person would also be responsible for being generative in ideas we haven't even imagined and coming back to you with policy recommendations should they be necessary. So yes, and is the answer.
And how about,
And for us, I'm gonna add in from the building and rental side of it, what we have assured our customers of is that if we are going to enact additional regulations or requirements, either as part of a rental inspection or as part of a building or certificate of occupancy, is that we would provide dedicated resources to help them through that process and help them understand what that process is before we enact it. Our goal with this person is to be a primary point of contact for those people as this program moves forward. We have a lot going on. There's a lot of regulation out there already. The apartment owners, the landlords, the building community is always hesitant when the community starts to enact additional regulation upon how they do their business. Our goal with this person is if we're going to move forward with this program and the city finds this program to be important, is that we can go to them and tell them we have provided a dedicated resource to help them get through that process. So that's
And to co-develop it.
that's our interest in it, and to develop it,
Yeah.
correct.
well, thank you. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Delacourt and Dr. Stoltz also, and I know that word on the street is that the department's running great, and people really appreciate the service that you're providing. And
Appreciate it.
I also just want to say, like, so no offense if I vote against it, because it is likely to pass. So I've been here, I'm in my 11th month here, and so we have easily had 11 8-vote requirements, easily. So 1 a month, 2 a month, I mean, like Councilwoman Lum said, we're always being asked to waive our budget. And I didn't know if that was new or not, but she insists it's not, that it's a relatively new thing that we're doing here. I mean, yeah, the frequency of that, and so I'm concerned about that. I haven't really had a chance to look back into old agendas and see if there has been a trend towards that, but I'm most interested in if that's so, and I'm concerned about that, so I just wanted to share that with everybody. Thank
Councilor
you.
Griswold.
Yeah, I agree this is a great idea. However, it seems if it's such a great idea, why can't we prioritize it within the existing budget? And what troubles me is we still have children crossing the street in crosswalks with no lighting. And so as a council member, I need to look at all of our needs. And again, this is great, we need to move forward with it, but how can we prioritize it within the existing budget? Thanks.
Councilor Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the conversation around fiscal responsibility. It's something near and dear to my heart. And it sounds like that is the hang-up, so I won't speak to the value, the need, or the urgency of making this higher, but instead try to make an argument for the fiscal responsibility of it. If we don't use this money, we'll continue to sit on revenue that we've earned from private real estate developers who want to do business in this city. And it's money that we're just sitting on it for half the position. The other half of the position is savings that we've already realized. Savings that we realize because we have civil servants who work hard to manage their budgets and find savings for the taxpayer. So this is money we would otherwise be sitting on. Half of it coming from real estate developers, half of it from taxpayers throughout the city who wouldn't get a rebate if we don't spend this money. So I would rather do something to accomplish our mission of creating high quality of life now and for future generations by helping our private construction industry do what they do, but a little bit greener.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold?
No.
Councilmember Lum?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Romali?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We now come to a set of public hearings. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about specific items on the agenda. In order to speak at a public hearing, you need not have signed up in advance, but your speech must relate to the subject of the public hearing. That is to say, the related item on the agenda. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we would be delighted to provide it to you. Public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend sections an ordinance to amend section 7.400, 7.401, 7.402, 7.403, 7.404, 7.405, and 7.406 of Chapter 55, Alarm Systems of Title 7 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 2, an ordinance to amend section 1.239 of Chapter 8 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor to add a Public Art Commission liaison to the Design Review Board. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 3, resolution to approve Shell Gas Station PUD site plan and landscape modification, 2679 Ann Arbor Saline Road. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 4, resolution to approve the 1831 Traver Road Leslie Science and Nature Center Brownfield Plan. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 5, resolution to approve fees for medical marijuana facilities, adult use marijuana establishment permits. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. A1, we have before us the work session minutes of September 23rd and the regular session meeting minutes of October 7, 2019. May I have a motion, please, to approve these minutes? Moved by Councilmember Griswold, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. B1, an ordinance to amend section 7.400, 7.401, 7.402, 7.403, 7.404, 7.405, and 7.406 of Chapter 93, Alarm Systems of Title 7 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please, of B1. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. B2, an ordinance to amend section 1.239 of Chapter 8 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor to add a Public Art Commission liaison to the Design Review Board. Moved by Councilmember Ramlawi, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please, of B2.
Thank you,
Councilmember
Mayor
Amlai.
Taylor. I'm sorry.
No, pardon me.
Yeah, well, it went well the first time this came to council. I'm hoping to get the same kind of support in bringing this forward, amending the ordinance and having somebody from the Ann Arbor Arts Commission represent the community's input and interest when it comes to public art or possible ways to influence design at the early stages at the Design and Review Board. Again, this is not going to be a voting member, but somebody who can help facilitate conversations and may spark something with those discussions at that early stage that can improve the aesthetics of the building and hopefully provide some public art that's being that would be done by the developers and not the taxpayers, as we look to get away from having taxpayers pay for public art, trying to influence private partnerships and private installations of public art, which is a lot less controversial and far more expedient. So I hope to get everyone's support here. I know Councilmember Lum has co-sponsored it, and I appreciate that. Again, just looking for some cross synergy between our boards and commissions to strengthen our community.
Further discussion? Councilmember Hayner, then Lum, then Griswold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to support this because we certainly need something to improve our built environment. I really believe that strongly. And hopefully this will provide that little spark. And not only in keeping public art in mind, but in keeping, when they take a look at these designs and site plans for these buildings, that they keep in mind that the public art needs a space, and it might not always be a wall. It might be some space on the site plan that they can create and it seems like, especially in our downtown area, when you look at the map of all the downtown parks, it counts non-university properties. It's very sparse. We have hardly anything at all, some tiny corner parks. And so I think it's long since, and some water gardens and things, it's long since time that we make a bigger effort to incorporate open spaces and interesting spaces and interesting view sheds in our urban environment. So hopefully this will facilitate that, so I'm fully supportive of that.
Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again, Councilmember Ramlawi, for your advocacy for this and for initiating this. I know you do good work as our Public Art Commission liaison, and this is an illustration of that. As I noted at the first reading, I think this is good for, several reasons. You touched on most of them, and our approach to public art has been, to focus exclusively on the city's capital projects, and I've always felt that that's a flawed approach, and it's just too narrow of a scope. This broadens that scope, and this, again, focuses on privately funded artwork as part of development projects, not taxpayer-funded public art. And so this is, as you said, this is synergistic. I absolutely agree. This is an appropriate place to the Design Review Board to conduct discussions about opportunities for public art installations, and, and obviously fits well with other design-related kinds of discussions. And so, again, thank you, and I hope this produces, some privately funded public art installations as part of these various development projects that we'll be seeing. Thank you very much. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Councilmember Griswold.
I agree with what's been said, and given that I'm losing my voice, I'll be listed as a co-sponsor.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. C4, resolution to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the city, nope, wrong one. C1, an ordinance to amend, thank you, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55 zoning of 0.16 acres from TWP Township District to R1C, Single Family Dwelling District, 2625 Valley Drive. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of C1. Councilmember Hayner.
Maybe it's not necessarily a question. I don't know if Mr. Delacorte's still here. Did he split? Oh, that's okay. I just wondered why these are coming in outside of our normal process, if these were petitioned parcels. Because we have 3 in a row here, and they're all sort of isolated parcels. And yeah, go ahead. Anyone who would love to answer that.
Yeah, it relates.
Thank you.
I don't know if.
If I,
Ms. Beaudry?
They petition, the individual property owners
Right.
petition for annexation.
Okay.
So it's just the rezoning once the annexation's been.
Part of the review.
all right, thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. C2, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55 zoning of 0.6 acres from TWP Township District to R1B, Single Family Dwelling District, 595 Riverview Drive. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Discussion, please, of C2. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. C3, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55 zoning of 0.48 acres from TWP Township District to R1B Single Family Dwelling District, 245 Orchard Hills Drive. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Discussion, please, of C3. Usurper. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. DC1, resolution to amend the Old West Side Residential Parking District, 3rd Street, and appropriate general fund unobligated fund balance in the amount of $2,000. Moved by Councilmember Ramlawi, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of DC1.
Just very briefly,
Please.
the Old West Side Association brought this forward. In fact, bypassed the 2 of us and went right to staff because they know how to go through the process. And staff did a great job looping us in. We're happy to sponsor this.
Councilmember Ramlawi.
Yeah, I appreciate our residents' eagerness, and we just had to point the way, and they did the rest. And we're looking for support on this. This does, I will talk about something in terms of an agenda item later that comes up when we talk about parking and, you know, the need for parking or the lack of it, and people parking in neighborhoods. And this is kind of a response to some development in the area. So as we see more development, we will see more need for this type of program. So just adding that in here, and I hope to get council support. I do believe this is something that deserves council support.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved with 11 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement. DC2, resolution to amend the Burns Park Residential Parking District Woodlawn Avenue and appropriate general fund unobligated fund balance in the amount of $2,000, moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion, please, of DC2, Councilmember Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. What they said, but about the third ward. Pretty much the exact same process, thanks to Crystal Allen in customer service for all her help.
Further discussion? Councilmember Grand.
Just also like to thank Jaren Crane, who's a resident on Woodlawn, who facilitated the process. And one didn't get verified, but I know at one point she had 100% participation. This is also, you know, some of the other discussions about parking have been in response to development. This is not one of those cases. From what the neighbors say, this seems to be mostly people who work at the university parking in their neighborhood and they just can't get in. So they want to be able to park on the street. And there is some commercial development that is happening around there, which is actually great for the neighborhood. And I was able to have a conversation with one of the owners about, and just, you know, give them a heads up that this was coming down so that they can alert their staff to just pick a different side of the street to park on.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. DC3, resolution to appoint Sophie Goulet to the Ann Arbor Public Art Commission, moved by Councilmember Eaton, seconded by Councilmember Rumlowy. Discussion, please, of DC3. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved with 11 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 7-vote requirement. DC4, resolution to appoint Micah Bartolome to the Downtown Development Authority, moved by Councilmember Rumlowy, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion, please, of DC4. Councilmember Hayner.
Is this a 7 votes for the residence address?
Correct.
So is this a special spot that this person's taking?
The gentleman is not an Ann Arbor resident.
Just loves the downtown or something?
Business owner.
Business owner downtown? That's what I mean, is that this is replacing a special slot?
He is,
Like there, I know
Well,
there's required appointment seats on
I
there.
understand.
Yeah.
Works downtown?
I don't know whether I hesitate to say yes, because I don't know whether
Maybe-
other
maybe
places.
Susan could answer.
Whether other people satisfy that spot. Like, by way of example, the person who we just approved also works in the downtown. This gentleman I know has, you know, equity interests in downtown businesses, if that's relevant.
Just wondering why it's 7 votes for something that's downtown.
Well, it's 7 votes because he's not an Ann Arbor resident.
Right.
Councilmember Lum.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, right, 7 votes required because he's not a resident, but he is a business owner, and I think that's who should be on the DDA. This is for a partial term, and, you know, I think DDA members should be folks with skin in the game, either a business owner, taxpayer, or a resident taxpayer, and have relevant experience, and he meets both criteria, in my view.
Further discussion?
I
Councilmember Rumlowy.
agree, and thank you. Thank you for that explanation.
I'm sorry.
It's good to see new faces on the DDA. I know Micah, we don't always see eye to eye on everything, but he does, like Councilmember Lum said, have skin in the game. He has businesses and investments in the downtown area. I think he'll provide a fresh perspective on matters, and I'll be supporting him.
Councilor Hayner, did I interrupt you? My apologies.
Thank Councilmember Lum for the explanation, because, you know, it's hard to find out everything about everybody, so I appreciate that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? is approved with 11 council members present, all voting the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement. DC 5, resolution to provide direction to the city administrator on the provision of solid waste services, moved by Councilmember Eaton, seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion, please, of DC 5. Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. On October 7th, the city administrator released a solid waste roadmap, and that roadmap described combining all of the downtown, all of the commercial, and all of the multi-unit solid waste collection services into one bundle to make it easier to subcontract it. Last year in May, we passed a resolution directing the administrator not to privatize solid waste services that are currently being provided by city employees. This is just to repeat and affirm that position, and I hope that I have your support on this because we've done this before. Thank you.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Eaton, for bringing the conversation back up. I was glad to support the resolution back in May. Because Mr. Lazarus and Mr. Hupy aren't with us and are out of town, I would be curious if colleagues would be willing to postpone this so we can use this as an opportunity to just have a solid waste discussion on the agenda. Because I think a lot of us have follow-up questions after that October work session that'd be, I don't know, that need a platform for discussion.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion to, I mean, will they be back at the next meeting?
I assume.
Yeah, I'd move to postpone this to the next meeting.
Seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion of the postponement. You still have the floor.
That's it.
Further discussion, postponement. Councilmember Eaton.
Because this doesn't do anything new, it merely restates what we previously directed the administrator to do, and it affirms our previous position. I'm not sure that there's much to discuss unless everybody has decided that we're going to abandon the position that we took last May. I would suggest that we've had our work session on solid waste. This is the roadmap that he intends to follow. This is not the last thing that I will pick out of the roadmap to address through resolution, but it certainly, according to his chronology in that roadmap, this is the first thing that he intends to do. And so I appreciate what you're describing, but I don't think that we're going to have a further discussion about solid waste. We had that work session, and this is just to affirm the direction that we previously gave him. So I don't see any reason to postpone it.
Councilmember Ramlawi, then Ackerman.
I'm a little confused by this. If this just reaffirms things and what we approved last still stands, why does the vote need to occur tonight? I support union labor. I support the values that are perpetrated that brought this resolution forth, but just a little perplexed as to if it's not really doing anything, and the last thing we said was what this says, then that still stands.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I for one, submitted something like 12 questions after the work session. I got answers to all of them in writing, but we haven't yet had the opportunity to have a follow-up conversation. And something as critical as solid waste in our next 5-year plan, I think needs more deliberation. And I was excited for this to have, as an opportunity to have that conversation, but without the appropriate staff, that can't happen.
Councilmember Smith.
You know, first thing is, I would echo what my Fifth Ward colleague said is, you know, there's been nothing no vote to overturn the current council policy, so I see this as duplicative and unnecessary. I would also say that one of the things that we've heard at this table, particularly about joining the solid waste, Regional Solid Waste Authority, is we can't have that discussion until the solid waste plan is done. You know, we don't have a solid waste plan in front of us. What we had is a report that that gave us some information, but that is not the solid waste plan that will come to us for eventual approval. The Environmental Commission will be discussing this in depth at the December, the December 6th meeting, I think, is what I've been told. I can't remember if it's the December 6th or the November meeting. But it was, we will be having additional discussion on it then before any recommendation would come back to council. So I would think that, you know, it would be premature to have this discussion absent the relevant staff here to discuss it.
Councilor Lum.
Is the move to postpone on the table?
It is.
Okay, so to the postponement, I would just say in defense of not postponing, and I submitted, like 30-plus questions after the work session and got a response last week. And so there's still a lot of, issues to discuss, obviously. And I do appreciate the responses received. When we last voted on this was May 21st, this to the postponement, and it was passed on a 7-4 vote. I did not vote for it, along with the mayor, former Councilmember Westfall, and Councilmember Smith. So we have a new group now, so I think that's a reason why it's not just going over the same old ground with obviously not the same people. The people here tonight, you know who voted, you know amongst yourselves who voted for this, but there's 1, 2, 3 council members who supported previously who are no longer here. So I think it's appropriate to weigh in on this.
Councilor Grant.
Thank you. I completely agree with Councilmember Mullally. This does seem, and I agree with Councilmember Ackerman that I think this is, you know, if we are going to give such specific direction before having an entire plan in hand, then we should have the relevant staff here. You know, we've had a lot of discussions at this table about existing council policy and new council policy, but this is not presented as new council policy. This is an affirmation of existing council policy. So to me, there isn't really the same level of urgency there. And I think if we want to have a new policy, then bring forward a new policy, but I don't want to have a new policy. I was one of those council members that very proudly voted on May 21st, 2018 to support this policy. I think it's really straightforward that we use union labor for solid waste, that we're certainly not looking to reduce our union workforce in this area. I anticipate that if anything, it'll stay the same or it will be increased as the new plan goes forward. But I would like to hear from staff, and I'm very supportive of a short postponement so that we can have our experts at the table.
It's been represented that this, that all this resolution does is ratify the existing resolution. Is there solid waste staff in the House who can let us know whether that's accurate or not?
Mr. Hupy was not here, able to attend tonight, so there's not staff here.
All right, so that we cannot, it's been represented that it's a ratification, but we can't have that confirmed by staff. In my view, that speaks to it being appropriate for a postponement. You know, we have as Councilmember Ramlawi says, the resolutions from back in 2018 stands. That's the rules. Mr. Lazarus, if nothing else follows the rules, in my view, it's the ongoing policy, and that's going to be the order of the day until council changes its mind. But I don't know exactly what's in here and how this coincides with the existing policy. And so I'm going to support the postponement so that we can find out.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Reedon.
Thank you. So I believe we gave the administrator clear direction on May 21st. We haven't done anything to change that direction, so I believe it remains in effect. But his October 7th roadmap on solid waste clearly announces the intention to subcontract work that's currently being performed by city employees. It's number 4 on the second page. And in response to an agenda question where I asked whether this doesn't conflict with the May 21st, 2018 direction that we gave him, he seems to believe that it doesn't. And so I think that it is appropriate for us to affirm that direction as still being in force and susceptible to being obeyed.
Further discussion of the postponement? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold?
No.
Councilmember Long?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes?
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Mlawi?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Bannister?
No.
Motion fails.
Excuse me, Mayor. Could we take a short break?
Can we vote on this first?
Could we take a short break? I brought Attorney Elias is down here. I'd like to talk to Councilmember Eaton briefly on a matter and relating to it that might be relevant. Before you take a vote on it.
Let's take a short break. We are back after a short break. Mr. Eaton, Councilmember Eaton, my apologies.
So upon advice of council, I would like to move to strike the last resolved clause of the resolution.
Seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Is that amendment friendly to the body? The amendment is friendly. Further discussion, the main motion as amended. Councilmember Hayner.
Just briefly, I would like, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to say that, you know, I wasn't one of those folks who supported this notion in May, and I recognize what people are saying, that until it's rescinded, it still stands, and we've seen examples of that, and we were just speaking to some privately. And, you know, I'd be happy to support this, and I would have been happy to support it in May, and I think that striking that does help. It kind of helps clarify what's going on here a little bit. I still would, I kind of have to agree that I would prefer something that is, you know, exhibiting change, but I'm happy to support this as I would have had been in May. Thank you.
Further discussion? So I guess, you know, well, as I said from the jump, I don't know, and not having heard from staff as to the congruence between now the first two resolve clauses and the actual resolution in May. I guess I don't know what's in these clauses and how that relates to the May resolution, and I don't know what changes those two resolve clauses would affect. And so I guess I would ask if someone would consider offering an amendment, essentially striking the two resolve clauses and saying something to the effect resolved that the city council ratifies and approves resolution R 18-194 to ensure that what we are in fact doing is what we have said that we're doing, and that is ratifying the existing policy. Seconded by? Or rather, is there someone who would like to do that, or if not, that's all right.
I wanted to speak, and he needs somebody to move and second.
Second, moved by Councilmember Lum, second by Councilmember Griswold. That is to say, resolution offering an amendment, deleting the first two resolve clauses, saying with reserving, reinserting rather, resolved, the city council ratifies resolution R 18-194. Discussion of the amendment. Councilmember Eaton.
With regard to the amendment, in his response to the agenda questions, he makes clear that he doesn't consider the May 2018 resolution to be a limit on his ability to subcontract downtown work that's being performed by city employees. Instead, he asserts that if we move those same employees to other solid waste services, that it's consistent with that prior resolution. I wrote that prior resolution. I don't believe that's what it says. So I would like to clarify with these two resolve clauses that that's really what we meant in May of 2018, and we still mean it. There's a distinction between eliminating jobs and eliminating work. He's preserving the number of employees, but he has expressed through his October 9th roadmap that he intends to contract out the work. And those are, in labor relations, those are two distinct areas. And so this resolution is meant to restate and affirm what we previously said, but in a manner so that he doesn't further argue with the intent of that resolution. So I hope that you'll vote against removing those two resolve clauses and remove any argument that may persist in his mind about what the previous resolution meant.
Councilmember Ramlawi.
I just am not comfortable right now voting on this without, staff here to answer questions. I mean, it's asking for the city administrator to cease all actions. I mean, stop what you're doing. Don't give us any options. Don't let council as a body look at everything and make a decision. And it limits our choices, perhaps. Some may support it, some may not. But the city administrator works for the entire city. And I think, you know, that to me is just, it's handcuffing somebody that's set out to do a job. And I just don't like it. As much as I stand by, you know, the values of union and union labor, I also know that our solid waste in downtown and other parts hasn't been at its best performance. And we're in the middle of a major re-overhaul. And we don't have staff here to respond to questions or tell us what's different between this one and the one that was passed in 2018. And it's just, I don't understand if something that means this much can't be postponed until staff is here to respond to some of the questions. And, you know, unfortunately, my colleagues put me in a bad position here. I cannot support this in the current situation.
Councilor Grand, then Hayner,
Thank you.
on the amendment.
Yes. So I'd like to support the amendment, and I know it's speaking to the resolution, but I think it you know, speaks to one being very clear and one being not so clear. You know, when I read part of the first resolve clause, any part of which are currently performed by city staff, there's a lot of room for ambiguity in that statement. There could be someone from city staff who comes down to the mayor's green fair and does recycling education. That could be related to solid waste. So now, should that person have to be unionized? I don't know. Do we have to? And I understand that's not the intent, and this is why I voted for the postponement, because I think we need some city staff here to help us clarify where we are. And in May 2018, I voted to support this resolution because even though we had options in front of us, it was pretty clear what those options were going to be, and it was pretty clear that we weren't, you know, or at least the majority of council was not going to go with one of those options because it was going to privatize, or, you know, and that went against our values. This, to me, is a lot more wishy-washy. I think what we have now protects the staff that we have. It could possibly even give them some potential to grow within their positions. It doesn't limit as much of what they do. Because I think we've gotten stronger as a city when we've allowed workers, for example, to, you know, they can plow snow in the winter and cut grass in the summer. They can, you know, it shouldn't have to be limited. What I think we do stand strong as a city in saying that, you know, we believe that our unionized city workers should be unionized, but I'm just not sure what value added we have here. I'd rather know what our options are, and then, you know, with the stance that we have, say, you know, how can we ensure that we use our city staff to our greatest capacity, our unionized staff, and then, you know, what does it look like to use unionized staff for these other jobs, and how can we maximize that as much as possible? But I'm not really sure why this is coming here to us now, and why we, you know, couldn't wait a couple weeks.
Councilor Hayner.
To speak to this shuffling of the resolve clauses, the resolve clause that means the most to me is the second one, which says that City Council affirms its opposition to privatization for solid waste services not currently performed by an outside contractor. That's the important part to me. And so I would keep the second one and get rid of the first and the third one. I'm not sure that's where we're at here. Where are we at here with these resolve clauses? What was the motion? To delete the first two and leave the third? For me, it would be.
The third is already gone.
The third is gone, so we're talking about losing the first two?
Yes.
Ratifies the May 21st.
Yeah,
Right.
the proposal was to delete the first two resolve clauses and to substitute them with the ratification, but
In the third, yeah, so.
In the third.
So one.
I mean, the one that means the most to me is the second one, so I guess that means I'm not supporting this because I don't want to amend an amendment. I don't want to go down that hole.
amending an amendment is perfectly proper
I mean,
procedure.
I would leave the second one. If it was me, I would change it to say, just leave the second resolve clause and then,
So what I hear-
which actually acts as a ratification in my mind.
So what I hear you saying is that you would offer an amendment to the amendment, that is to say, to provide that the amendment now only relates to the first resolve clause, saving the second.
I hear
I-
from
I-
those that put it forward that that's friendly.
I'm not sure that's what I meant. I would lose the first one.
Yes.
Keep the second one.
Exactly.
And then that's fine, but it seems like the second one acts as our affirmation on its own. But that's my take on it. And to be frank, after this conversation, I'm considering moving for postponement again. And I wish that I had voted the other way on that matter. So I
You
would
can
need a
move for
second for that.
reconsideration.
What's that?
You can move for reconsideration.
I would move for reconsideration.
Of the postponement.
I'm sorry to do that to us, but
That's right. Is there a second?
Hayner, Jeff didn't vote for the,
I didn't,
oh, you were on
He
the
was
winning side.
prevailing.
Oh, that's right, okay. Never mind.
Procedurally, we're on the amendment.
I know, so that's why I'm sorry to go down that.
That's all right. Well, let's have an for my part, I think postponement is probably was what I prefer. May I ask that the amendment be withdrawn, and then we roll with the reconsideration on the postponement, and then we'll take it from there?
Otherwise, I would try and recraft it, but I got a little out of sync as where we are to just leave the second resolve clause only and get rid of this.
Get rid of number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
Pardon me, get rid of number 1 and
Get
number.
rid of 1 and 3 and
Yes.
the affirmative statement, because I believe that 2 acts as that affirmation. So that's where I would like it to be, but I'm not sure that's a proper motion, nor has it found a second, so.
It was friendly, so I don't think it needs.
Well, it's not
to-
friendly.
Okay.
It was to,
I think that someone would have to withdraw the proposed amendment that's currently being considered
Perhaps,
in order to allow him to make his motion to reconsider,
yes. But
which wouldn't prevent them from bringing back the amendment if
exactly. So let's do that. So I forget who moved and seconded the, is it all right, Lemon
Griswold.
Griswold, is it all right if we pull that back? All right, so the amendment is withdrawn for the time being. Motion to reconsider with respect to the postponement.
With your permission.
I'm here to serve. Is there a second on the reconsideration? Councilmember Amlawi. Can we have a roll call vote on the reconsideration?
If it helps, I won't oppose it this time, and I think that we could do it by a claim, can't we?
If we can do it by a claim, we can do it by a claim. All in favor of the reconsideration? Sorry, I need 2 people on the other, I need 2 people on the other side.
Oh, never mind then.
Is that true?
Go ahead with the roll call vote, it'd be quicker.
All right, roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Grand on the postponement,
This is
sorry.
to reconsider
the
the
reconsideration.
postponement.
The postponement.
Allowing that to come back.
Is there a second?
Councilmember Amlawi.
Don't even-
We need a second also? I'm being told we need a second who voted against the postponement.
I would second this
Thank you,
motion.
Councilmember Eaton. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold on the reconsideration.
Reconsideration first.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Long?
Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Romali?
Absolutely.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The motion for postponement is up now for reconsideration, so it is on the floor with the prior movers and seconds. Is there further discussion of the motion to postpone? Councilmember Hayner, then Griswold.
Just thank you for your indulgence on that. I think perhaps after that continuing conversation, it made me rethink my consideration of postponement, so I appreciate you allowing me to bring it back for another vote.
Councilmember Griswold.
Yeah, I just think that we are a policy-making group with a lot of priorities, and this discussion tonight seems crazy. I don't know how else to put it. It seems like we have a resolution because it's perceived that the city administrator is not following a previous resolution that we passed, and now we're talking about postponing some resolution. And if anyone in the audience knows exactly what we're doing, you know, great. But I just think that this is all extremely difficult and reflects poorly on us as a governing body.
Further discussion of the postponement? Councilmember Hayner.
I think, and this may sound a little coarse around the edges, but I'm asking for this postponement because it fits with my longstanding policy of not saying anything behind somebody's back that I wouldn't say to their face. And so if we feel that the administrator has been ignoring policy wishes of this body, then we should ask him to his face in public, in a public discussion about these matters. So that's all. I think it sits with me morally that we postpone this.
For Councilmember Romano.
I just appreciate that extra 15, 20 minutes gave us the opportunity to come to the conclusion of good government and, you know, and allowing for full discussion. Thank you.
Councilmember Lum.
Yeah, I will support the postponement, but in general, obviously, when a similar resolution came to council in May of last year, I didn't support it because I believed it unnecessarily limited the city's flexibility and closed the door on options to improve solid waste efficiencies, system efficiencies that we should consider. So I will support the postponement, but I think, and in the roadmap for solid waste resource, in the solid waste resource management plan, and we've seen it, there's been some pushback on a savings estimate, and staff has confidence in the analysis, to use their words. And the plan is to competitively procure the business, and we'll see this, completion is expected by November, I understand. And I just think that, in general, competitive bidding is always a sound fiscally responsible approach to take. And I've, in the past, proposed resolutions for competitive bidding for solid waste. So, again, you don't have a problem postponing this, but I think you can sense where I'll be coming from when we revisit this, so thanks.
Further discussion of the postponement? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is postponed. DC 6, resolution to approve fees for medical marijuana facilities, adult-use marijuana establishment permits. Moved by Councilmember Ramlawi, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of DC 6. Councilmember Ramlawi.
Thank you for bringing this forward. I sponsored the ordinance allowing recreational marijuana to take effect November 1st, and this is just protocol and allowing that to follow through. The fees that are associated with the permitting process will go back into administering the program. I just hope that future fees that we collect give us the latitude to put money into social programs associated with the social ills and social injustice that come along in our, in everybody's life. Everybody knows somebody that has some issues that could be helped with, and providing the revenue coming from this new industry should go back into helping people who need the help the most. So unfortunately, we were not able to procure money at this step. Hopefully in the future we will. But look forward. It seems to be a pretty straightforward type of legislation.
Further discussion? Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you. I know it's just first reading on this, and we may have some people show up at the next public hearing, a second reading. There will be a second reading, public hearing scheduled, correct? No? Because it's just a straight-up resolution for fees? Well, let me just say that there's some equity issues with these fees. Annual permit application, so that would be like a first permit, $5,000. I know that's permitted, allowed by the state. Additional permit type, $5,000. I understand, again, it's allowed by the state, and so would be the renewal of an annual permit at $5,000. And now that seems like a barrier to entry for the small business owner to me. $5,000 just to ask for a permit, and then $5,000 to renew it. When we set the liquor license renewal fees, it's based on staff time, and I know we're getting ready to raise those up, because there has been increased staff time and increased wages and so on the end of that to deal with those liquor licenses. And I would assume the same for this, but I mean, I think a liquor license renewal is 90, going up to 100 and something, and this is 5,000. So does this not have to be commensurate with the service provided? Maybe that's a question for our, sorry to spring that one, Mr. Crawford, is that a question for our acting administrator or our attorney? I thought that our fees had to be commensurate with services provided.
Yeah, I think with the analysis that there has been a determination that would be appropriate. That's my understanding.
Because
Yes,
there's so much more that we're doing relative to, say, a liquor license or any other kind of permit fee for an event or anything like that?
I haven't looked at this specifically, but I believe when the state law allowed for permits to be at this level, it was not required to be at a cost basis.
So that's written
something-
into the
it's
state
something
law.
I'd have to look at, though.
Yeah, that was sort of my question. That's one of the state rules, so we can,
The maximum was set by the state.
and that's what this is, correct?
Right.
Yeah, because I remember seeing the 5 in there. Okay, well, I'm not sure I can support this, especially for the renewal. Of course, once you're in business, you're going to have that money for that renewal. So I'm not sure I support this maximum, although I would love, as Council Member Ramwali said, to have this money directed properly to places that we think are kind of equitable uses for what it's, the permit is being applied for. But I mean, there's going to be no excess if it costs us $5,000 to process these. Now, my other question around that would be, is there any situation where anyone applies for this and is denied, except for egregious cases, they don't meet the state law requirements? I mean, we're not going to be denying any of these, are we? I can't, it's hard to picture. And so in that case, the cost doesn't seem, I'm not sure what it is we're checking out on these. Could somebody fill me in on, I'm sorry I didn't ask these as council questions or agenda questions. What is it that we're doing for that $5,000? Anyone?
I haven't looked at that issue. I'm going to have Kristen Larkham come down and see if she can answer it, but I know she's worked with Derek Delacourt on that, I believe.
Okay, thank you for clarifying this. It just seems like a large amount. When we talk about other equity issues, when we're looking at this categorization of creating this matrix for evaluating, and one of those things is equity, and this is just like, writing that check is a big equity issue, to me.
Ms. Beaudry, then Graham, then Hayner. Pardon me, then Ramlawi.
I can clarify that both the medical marijuana law and the adult use recreational law allow a maximum of 5,000, and when medical was approved, it was decided by this body that we would charge the maximum, which I understand is what other other municipalities that are licensing marijuana also charge the maximum. So this resolution was just to expand it from the medical fee to all marijuana permits.
And so additional permit type would be the registered carrier, the micro business, any of those things.
Right.
Consumption. Okay, so
But the
this
original-
is a small business matter then, this isn't for the casual user. Now, this isn't the home permitting, right? This is only for the 5 business types. Okay, or 7, yeah, thank you.
But it was not based on staff time, it was based on the maximum allowed under the law.
Okay. So will we have an excess? If staff time isn't chewed up by
Well,
that?
The staff time is, we're not adding staff, so the staff is going to be there anyway. So when you think about excess, it's just new revenue into the city for already existing staff resources to implement.
And so this is for the clerk's office then?
The clerk's office collects the revenue, but it's general fund revenue.
Okay. No, I was looking for thank you. I want to know the ultimate destination of those fees.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I remember at our last meeting when we were talking about this, there were a lot of concerns about what these new businesses might cost to the city in terms of some other resources, like public safety, for example, and whether you believe that to be true or not. You know, anytime there is a new business type, there are going to be some staffing costs, education, you know, what have you. So $5,000 to me doesn't seem like an exorbitant cost. I know we have a small business owner at the table. I'm sure there are other costs that are much larger barriers to starting a new business than a $5,000 permit fee. Not to downplay the equity concern, but if this has worked for us in the past with the medical business, I think seems totally reasonable to keep it this way for all the other types.
Councilmember Umlawi.
Appreciate the second time to talk on the matter, and as Councilmember Grant said, yes, as a small business owner, I look at this and say, yeah, it is a lot of money, but, you know, for my food license, it's $1,000 a year. So, you know, $5,000 is a lot, I agree, but there's a lot of resources that have already gone into this, to be honest with you. I mean, how much time the legal department's put into drafting the ordinance and reviewing the law, giving us advice, plus all the external costs that may come with it that we're not sure of. So it will take a year or more to figure out what our true costs are, what are other costs coming in that we didn't anticipate. But to say this is a, you know, barrier to, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit of America, I don't believe so.
Further discussion? Councilor Lum.
Just like to provide an observation from the Liquor Licensing Committee. As you know, Councilmember Hayner, and I appreciate that you serve on the Liquor Licensing Review Board, the annual reviews alone are pretty time-consuming, and that's an understatement. That's a massive understatement. It involves the treasurer's office, the attorney's office, the police department, the building department, the fire department. I'm sure I'm missing someone. And every business that has a liquor license in the city of Ann Arbor is reviewed by all of those functions annually. And we have talked about increasing the $90 renewal fee annually, and I appreciate that Ms. Boudry has been looking into this because, you know, I don't think we're capturing, we're recovering all the costs associated with that, and so there are some fairly significant costs associated with this kind of work, and I also support this fee proposal. And it's, again, as was noted by Councilmember Grant, it's consistent with, and Ms. Boudry, the fees that we charge medical marijuana facilities and businesses.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold, absent. Councilmember Long,
Yes.
Councilmember Grant,
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowy,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner,
No.
Councilmember Bannister,
Yes.
motion carries.
DB1, resolution to approve Shell Gas Station PUD site plan and landscape modification 2679, Ann Arbor Saline Road, moved by Councilmember Ramlawi, seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion, please, of DB1. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. DB2, resolution to approve the 1831 Traver Road Leslie Science and Nature Center Brownfield Plan, moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Graham. Discussion, please, of DB2. Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you all for, hopefully, your support for this. That was a real thing we ran into over there, and we need to take care of it. I'm sorry that this happened to the city, and I'm glad that it will not be happening moving forward as we are vigilant about our Phase 1 analysis of all properties that we take on. So, sorry to taxpayers for that one, but hopefully we have another 100 years of enjoyment out of a remediated Leslie Science and Nature Center. And hopefully we can move forward in the future to creating the connectivity on that side of town, the proximity of Leslie to the golf course and some other valuable properties in Black Pond Woods and so on, And the more of these kind of wildlife corridors and connectivity we can create, I think the better off we are moving forward in the future. So thank you for supporting this out of the Brownfield Committee.
Further discussion? Councilmember Bannister.
Is Derek Delacorte still in the building?
He was not here, but I might be able to
Okay.
answer your question.
Well, last night at caucus, one of the residents asked about DTE helping to contribute funds for this cleanup. And I'm not seeing that in the record, but I wasn't sure. I promised I'd raise it for the resident who asked yesterday.
This particular cleanup is being funded from the Brownfield, what they call a Brownfield LBRF fund, so it's previously captured funds. DTE has not yet contributed to that fund, so this is coming out of previously captured funds.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ramlawi.
I'm not sure if you can answer this, Mr. Crawford, or not, but what is DTE's ownership in the property? Do we know? Can someone here that may shed some light on that? Because we were told this last night. I don't know if it's true. Whether they have any ownership in the property.
I would have to follow up on that.
Okay.
Councilmember Hayner.
Hot out of Brownfield, I mean, I don't think that DT has any sort of, I mean, they made an investment and a donation to help fund the solar systems on that solar house, and it's kind of named the DT house and so on, but I don't believe they have any responsibility for the site whatsoever. Now, to speak to what Mr. Crawford said, these are funds that come from other applications, and in the future, DTE will be putting in handily for the Broadway, or the Broadway site, Broadway Park development. And so they'll be making some donations as part of that, but this is not associated with that in this way. So just to answer the resident from last night, DTE hasn't, as far as I'm aware, and I didn't see any reports, and Councilmember Smith is nodding vigorously to that assent, that they don't have any responsibility for the site whatsoever.
Yeah, it's from the
Further discussion?
crops.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved with, I need to say? No, I don't need to say. It's just approved. DS1, resolution authorizing publication of notice of intent to issue general obligation capital improvement bonds to fund Downtown Development Authority and Ashley Parking Structure Expansion Project. Moved by Councilor Lum, seconded by Councilmember Ramlawi. Discussion, please, of DS1. Councilmember Ramlawi.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I may speak twice on this. We had a pretty productive work session last Monday with the DDA for the first time since we all were seated together, and discussions went back and forth, and, you know, at the end, I felt like there were a couple different policy differences, and the needs for this expansion were being articulated in two different spheres. And one is future development and the need for future growth and the loss of future surface lots. And then there's the other one, talking about long wait lists. Members in the business community have spoken out recently now. We got a letter from Spark today advocating for the addition. And I just feel like as a body, we need to get together, and I'll be working on this, I hope, shortly with staff, to reform our policy and redirect the DDA in ways so we can clear up the differences that currently exist. I think it's overdue. I think it's necessary, and I don't think we need to necessarily vote this down or vote this up tonight. I think those policy differences must be addressed first, and then take a vote on it then. So I move to have this postponed to a date, to a future date that we can agree on, that we can have these differences worked out. So I can expand on that later, but I just, there's a couple things that I would be more comfortable with once these policy differences are managed to be worked out.
I think for a postponement, we looked for a date.
Well, since our city administrator isn't here, I'm not sure if Susan Palais is here to maybe answer some questions when it comes to these issues that I have. And the two issues are with our wait lists and Citizen Ed, thank you for getting us that information with your FOIA requests. But after reviewing them myself, I found it very hard to understand where the demand is. I think we have an antiquated way of tracking the system and knowing where our true needs are in real time. So I'd like to have that wait list done a little differently, where we get quarterly, if not monthly, reports as to where the demand is, and have a better system. Perhaps, you know, we have people on all different lists asking for everything. I mean, because we don't have a deposit required. You know, let's tease out some of this and make sure that, you know, hey, if you want to be on a wait list, then put some skin in the game. But, you know, how committed are you to this? Rather than just apply everywhere all the time. And we have a case where certain people are given permits and others are not. And we're not really clear, I'm not at least, as to how that's done. And we're giving permits to people who, instead of building parking, we're giving them, you know, give us a financial contribution and we'll allow you to build without that parking. I think that needs to be changed. I don't think that's a good practice. I think it's leading to a lot of conflict in our community and in our downtown. And I look to know how long will it take for that system, for the waiting list to be addressed. And I can speak with our city administrator and others and staff to find out how long it'll take to address the other issues that we have with allowing developers to pay for parking from the DDA rather than build it themselves. Those are two issues that I really need to get a better comfort level with before approving this at the current state.
And thank you for that. And I also want to thank the council for an excellent work session last week. As was mentioned, it was a really good discussion. And it really centered a lot on the policies and the quantities of parking and the future around parking. And it was a really helpful dialogue and definitely one to be continued. To your question about the deposit, we hadn't yet thought about that. That's a great idea. Something that's been discussed at the Operations Committee that we've not pursued is also to break it apart and issue permits solely to individuals. At this point, a business can ask for permits, or a property owner can ask for permits. Another idea is to make it person-specific. That's another change to how we would be measuring their weight, because it would now be down to an individual. So that's a great suggestion. To your point about working with ourselves to change the ordinances as relates to parking, I know a question that we have for council is, in addition to changing the contribution in lieu, is it time to question housing, affordable housing and parking? Is it a chance in downtown with the 415 property and the old Y lot, a chance to examine that piece of our ordinance? You know, can we begin to tease out how other communities have landed, which is parking maximums? We have a parking minimum system. Could we begin with affordable housing projects in our downtown? That's another way to begin to lessen the pressure on the permit system.
I appreciate your willingness to work on this with us. We do need a partner on the other side. I do not want to conflate affordable housing with this current issue. They are mutually exclusive. We can decide on that when it comes to those properties at that time. City-owned property, we can do whatever we want, write it how we will. And affordable housing, the beauty about it is those folks do not own cars at the same rate that folks who otherwise would live downtown have the affordability to own a car and pay for the parking and everything that goes along with transportation costs. My sense is that need is not as great. And so We've been trying to tackle affordable housing now for decades, and I don't want to wait for that to be solved before we address this more simple matter that we have that is causing a lot of friction. So I don't want to engage in the affordable housing. With this, at this time, I would like to keep it simple and keep it clear, if I could.
Further discussion?
So do,
Are you,
to postpone it, or?
The date would be the first meeting in January.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Eaton. Further discussion of the postponement, Councilmember Lum.
Yeah, I am reluctant to support a postpone. We've already postponed this, and, you know, obviously I've not always agreed with many DDA recommendations, but, you know, they removed the $4 million office build-out. That's no longer part of the plan. And, I mean, I think they've got it right this time. I did ask for wait list information. You saw the response. Thank you for the response to that, for all the structures downtown. And, I mean, I don't know what's going to change between now and January, to tell you the truth. The wait list is over 6,000 now. And even if the real demand is just half that, 3,000 is still a huge unmet demand. And so if you back out, as you said, indicated, Councilmember Malawi, you don't want to talk about, conflate this with the affordable housing discussion for these properties. And that's certainly in the background, because, you know, there's talk about converting all these surface lots and using them for affordable housing, not for parking. And, you know, but taking that out again, we know that, again, if you just, if the monthly permit wait list is just overstated by a factor of 2, yeah, we still have 3,000 plus people looking for monthly permits. So, I don't see things changing, frankly, in this whole landscape between now and, we had a good discussion about this last Monday. And so you know, I think there's more urgency to move on this and not delay, frankly.
Further discussion on the postponement, Councilmember Amlawi.
I believe there needs to be reform. There needs to be different ways of doing business. And I would feel more comfortable approving this when that is done. To say, well, maybe that'll get done, these are things that need to be addressed. There need things that need to be cleaned up now. This has been told to be the fastest and cheapest way to add parking to our system. It's essentially shovel-ready. I don't see any of those surface lots moving anytime soon. There's nothing in the pipework. There's nothing in the pipelines. This can be done in under 2 years or 2 years' time. So I'd rather clean up our house a little bit before we move forward.
Further discussion on the postponement, Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you. Yeah, I moved the first, or I postponed the first time so we could have our work session, which was, you know, it was interesting. It was my first one. I've sat in on some other ones, but that was pretty interesting. And you know, like many work sessions, you come out with as many questions as you went in with. And that was certainly the case on this topic. And so I would happily postpone this to January 6th. I think that's the first meeting. If only if it would give me more time to have my giant list of questions answered. And so I was surprised to hear a postponement motion come forward, but I'll fully support it.
Councilmember Smith.
So I'm happy to support the postponement, largely because, you know, as this is, I'm not likely to support it. You know, one of the rationales that we've been given for expanding the deck is to replace surface lot spaces that'll be lost in the coming years as a result of some of those lots being developed. Any development on those lots would have to be approved for those spaces to be lost, and I think that any expansion of this deck should be tied very specifically to the development of those spaces and to the creation of affordable housing. If we move ahead with parking expansion first without a direct link between those two things, I think it sets a terrible precedent that we're prioritizing car storage over housing. You know, I think creating affordable carbon-neutral housing on city-owned property so that people can live close to their jobs and not need a car is something we have to do if we have any hope of achieving local carbon neutrality. And I think you guys have heard me, public certainly heard me talk about this a lot, but, you know, in moving ahead with this, we're prioritizing driving downtown. And in the face of climate change and knowing that we have a lot of residents that want to see action instead of just words and actual progress towards local carbon neutrality, we all know that we have to make sacrifices to hope to achieve this goal. And one of these sacrifices is that we cannot delude ourselves into thinking that driving by yourself downtown and parking cheaply doesn't have a considerable impact on the environment and on contributing to climate change. And so for me, it's not a difficult decision to not support this absent the other ties. Ultimately, building more parking does nothing to incentivize behavioral change here. It does the exact opposite. We're making it easier to do what we don't want people to do. And then lastly, encouraging people to drive downtown is at odds with what I hear from a lot of residents, that they want downtown to be a more pedestrian-friendly place. Our highest concentration of car, pedestrian, and car bike crashes is in downtown. I believe that, you know, we can approach this better. I think continuing to come up with the same solutions for problems that are ongoing and systemic just leads us into more of the same problems that we have. I think we have to look for a completely different way to handle parking in this community.
Further discussion of the postponement? I'm sorry, Councilor Ackerman, then Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would support postponement as well. As I discussed at the last council meeting, I have a lot of hesitation in this for a lot of the reasons that Councilmember Smith articulated. I think there are 4 key arguments to constructing this parking, and for me, only one rings true and is compelling, and that is that increasing the parking at the Ann and Ashley structure would increase opportunity for the development of surface parking lots, which are objectively underutilized assets that this community has. How I'd love to see those assets be used is in the construction of affordable housing. And if you recall, this body asked staff, the Housing Commission, to report back on the viability of constructing affordable housing on a number of sites, some of which were in the downtown area in the DDA district. Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, which Councilmember Bannister and I sit on, actually got a sneak peek of that report, which will be coming to us soon. Of those many properties, 3 are in the DDA district and in this parking district, and are primed and you know, about as developable as land gets. And so I think the strings that Councilmember Smith articulated are real opportunities in the immediate horizon, and I think that there is that opportunity, but I don't think that opportunity exists yet. And I think that conversation is something that we can take up in the new year in a meaningful, substantive way, so that we can pursue affordable housing downtown, and take care of the externalities around our parking that may create.
Councilor Lum.
So we do know a couple of things. So we know that Ann Ashley is one of the busiest structures, and that its expansion is the most cost-effective way to add capacity, as Councilmember Ackerman just. Sorry about that. Thanks. I just said that Ann Ashley is the one of the busiest structures, and that this expansion is the most cost-effective way to add capacity. And Councilmember Ackerman just noted that the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board is looking at the surface lots in this vicinity to be redeveloped for affordable housing, so taking that parking out of the system. I do think that the case for adding to Ann Ashley is compelling, and honestly not quite sure what additional information we need to convince us of that. So I'm hearing, cars conflict with our values. I wonder which council member here doesn't have a car. And, if you believe and I know some of my colleagues do, that now's the time to consciously, take concrete actions to discourage car use and make it difficult for visitors and residents who want to drive their vehicles downtown, you should vote against this. Forget about postponing it. Inadequate parking is a surefire way to discourage folks from driving their vehicles downtown, no question about it. But if you believe, as I do, that in this auto-centric world that we live in, and with Ann Arbor's less robust mass transportation options, inadequate parking is a real economic risk to our downtown. And then I'd suggest the more prudent strategy is to approve this, and then we can have this robust conversation about the wisdom of, discouraging personal vehicles. And we can do things like, we can ask the DDA to publish the current monthly parking permit list for all the structures, publish it on the DDA's website, update it regularly. There's been some suggestions that maybe we should, to address council's concerns about using our public system for developments, that modify the zoning ordinance to eliminate the option that developers now have to seek a contract from the DDA to satisfy the parking requirement for their development. We could address that. We can multitask on this one. But I think, I think knowing what we know, postponing isn't the right action to take at this time.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ground.
Thank you. As I have kind of all along with this, I feel pretty conflicted, I think, like some of my other colleagues do about this. My biggest fear in not approving this is that when we go to try to redevelop those surface lots, that we will use the fact that we don't have additional parking as an excuse not to approve. So I see this as kind of a chicken and egg conundrum. If we're being asked to approve the parking so that we can redevelop the surface lots, but we're also saying, well, until the surface lots are redeveloped, we can't have the parking. But my fear is that third piece, that if we don't have the parking, that will be the barrier. It was certainly something that came up a lot in the prior library lot discussions for not approving the core spaces. And so that to me is my biggest fear. I'm also a little concerned about, just in terms of who's responsible to make those changes between now and January. So I think I'd like a little clarity on that, maybe from Councilmember Malawi or from staff. If the idea is to try to make those changes so that we get rid of parking in lieu, I'm not really sure who's, I would assume that we would play a role in that somewhere as a council. So that to me is really kind of more on us than it is on the DDA. Seeing the DDA as a partner and obviously having a lot of expertise in this area, but I feel like that's more on us than on them, and I'm not sure that it's right to punish them for our own inaction. So that's where I'm kind of torn here, and I'd like to hear others' thoughts about that.
Further discussion of the postponement, Councilmember Hayner.
I guess I'll just, since you asked for other thoughts, I guess I'll say that I don't see a postponement as a punishment as much as a way to kind of ask or have our questions answered that have come up from this conversation and so on. And so, what actions would we take between now and then? So if the problem was we have a lack of downtown parking and the solution is build more parking, well, that's just one solution. Another solution is free up spaces in the structures through other means. Do we charge enough right now? Perhaps if our structures are full, we're not charging enough. Perhaps there's a tiered system of uses or costs for users that need to be created. So somebody who's a downtown employee isn't necessarily paying, or they're paying $1.20 an hour, but somebody who isn't is paying more to use that same space so that we create the right kinds of spaces and uses in our structures. And so that's just one example. So when we talk about publishing a wait list, well, I'd like to see the use list. Because if the city and the county are taking 300-400 spaces in this structure, and we're creating new spaces because there's a demand for that. What better group of employees to kick it out to a park and ride lot than city and county employees, where they could take a park and ride and use a motor pool car when they were downtown if they had to run an errand at lunch. And so I guess I just throw that out there as an idea that this may not be the only solution to a problem that has been stated, a lack of downtown parking. And so for that reason, I think we should look at other solutions between now and, say, January 6th, which was the moved postponement date at the very least. And so that's why I'm supporting a postponement tonight.
Further discussion of the postponement? Councilmember Bannister.
This has been a big issue in the Ward 1, in the downtown neighborhoods, and because there is a big parking crunch for them, and they really are suffering, and that, this isn't even with all the things in the pipeline that are coming. So, they would like this parking structure. A lot of the Ward 1 residents would like these extra 375. I'm considering this postponement if we, to follow on Councilmember Grand's idea, that we would work on this hard during the postponement. And so like the laundry list of things that we would be working on would be to like increase the parking fines substantially if you park illegally in a residential parking permit area. Right now, it's only $25, which can actually give you 2 days of parking. If you get a ticket, you can stay there 2 days, which is cheaper than the structure. So dramatically deter parking in the residential parking permit area with a higher fine, increase the enforcements and the traffic enforcement. The wait lists, I had one of our people who attended caucus last night had FOIA'd the wait list and dissected it and saw many flaws on the wait list. Things like the double counting that's been mentioned, people on the list since 2010, and that there's something going on where it's not first come, first served who actually gets a parking space. So the whole issue of cleaning up the permits, the wait list. And then the biggest one of all is new development, just like it should handle its own stormwater, it should handle its own parking. And so a big one on people's list, and mine too, would be to, this zero parking requirement in D1 and D2 zones should be revoked, along with the approval of this extra 375 parking spaces.
Further discussion of the postponement? For my part, I'm sorry, you're Councilman Rackman.
Thank you. I think in the interim, if this postponement passes, staff and the DDA are going to have a lot of work to figure out how to get to 6 votes, because I think that there are a lot of different voices asking for different things and prioritizing different things. And that's going to be a challenge. And so I actually want to take a note from Councilor Member Ramlawi that I actually do want to conflate these conversations as much as possible, the parking and the affordable housing, because the only way that I see a benefit to this community in adding these 370 plus spaces is if it is to enable us as leaders to build affordable housing. And I'm really excited for my colleagues to get this report, because there's so much real opportunity at the surface parking lot at 4th and Catherine, the surface parking lot at 404 Ashley, the surface parking lot at Klein. There's huge opportunity for low-income tax credits for DDA partnership. That just as much as this is the cheapest and most accessible way to increase parking downtown, those 3 sites are, some of the best opportunities to construct new affordable housing in our city. And I would love as much as possible to make real headway on that and really focus our efforts on that instead of creating an impossible laundry list that can happen from now to January and really focus our efforts on what I think we all see as our number one crisis in our downtown, which is the lack of diversity and the need for affordable housing.
Further discussion?
If I can respond.
You've rolled twice on.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I guess for my part, understanding that there are issues that folks, reasonably want to ask questions about as to wait lists and so forth, I'm going to vote against the postponement because I support the project as is. The wait list rationale doesn't really sing to me, so that's not particularly important from my perspective as to this resolution. The resolution is, as Councilmember Ackerman said, is that it frees up space for affordable housing. That is to say, we will, council willing, someday retire surface parking lots, which are terrible uses of land, and we will remove hundreds of spaces from the system. And the removal of those spaces will cause heartache among businesses and residents, and they will come to us and they will tell us that they are unhappy with that choice. That's happened to me when I've proposed when I've trial ballooned privately affordable housing on some of these very sites. And the only way that we're going to offset that, the only way I think that we're going to have the collective stomach to address that and to overcome what will be opposition is if we have offset those spaces with other parking. I don't view this as being inconsistent with our values. Parking spaces can be occupied by vehicles that do not have internal combustion engines. People will be driving downtown, God willing, they'll be driving downtown more and more with electric-drive vehicles, and they will need places to park. And they will need more places to park if we use surface lots for affordable housing, as we absolutely should, and as I believe we will have the opportunity to do so. Getting those spaces online now will, I think, be as we hear from the DDA, the least costly, most efficient way to make ourselves ready to have that affordable housing investment. And so I would support it from the jump. And so that's why I'm going to respectfully oppose the postponement. Further discussion? Roll call vote on the postponement, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold, absent. Councilmember Lund,
No.
Councilmember Graham,
No.
Councilmember Ackerman,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
No.
Councilmember Eaton,
No.
Councilmember Nelson,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Rumlawi,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner,
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister,
Yes.
motion fails.
Further discussion of the main motion? Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you. I simply can't support this for the reasons I spoke during our requests for postponement and for the reasons I mentioned last week at the DDA work session. I don't believe that this is the best solution to managing our parking demand in this city, and I don't think we've made the right efforts to do so to this point. When I look at who's using these structures and who's taking them up and how it meshes with we're just at odds with ourselves. We talk about D1 and D2 downtown zoning, not requiring parking, which looks like a way to, looks like that, the big result from that downtown zoning was increasing the TIF capture and propping up parking demand in our system. Two benefits for the DDA. And I'd love to see this money spent better at park and ride lots. We'd get twice as many spots if this was on the outside of our community and built in a different method. And these city and county employees could use that, which would relieve spaces downtown. We could change our zoning to have reasonable parking maximums in new downtown structures and stop shifting the burden for private developments' failure to, by zoning, failure to provide parking, and which obviously increases demand on the structures. And so the the cost outweighs the benefits for me, despite the fact that we're told that the parking in the structure itself will pay for this. There's, I have bond issuance questions. It says not to exceed 10%, and it's on the books at 3.5%, but who knows what's going to happen in 2 years? Nobody might want those issuances, and we'll have to pay more than 3.5%. It's going to be a $30 million project, a $35 million project, cost overruns. I don't like it. We have a lot of needs in this city, and building parking spaces just is not at the top of my list. I understand it's the DDA's mission to promote private development in the downtown, and one of the ways to do that is to have parking. But that's yesterday thinking for me, and so I cannot support this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, again, I will be supporting this tonight. I'm not going to stress, with all due respect, about the DDA's ability to pay off this. We need to remember that the DDA's parking fund reserves are very healthy. It's $11.8 million at year-end fiscal year 19, which is about 50% of their annual revenue. Parking revenue is very, very, very stable. And thirdly, the DDA TIF revenue growth is another source of financial strength for them. The TIF revenues grew from $3.7 million in fiscal year 13 to $7 million in fiscal year 20, so almost double. And with this plan, the DDA will pay all the costs, debt service, and the issuance costs, and so they're up to it. There have been concerns raised about how expensive it is to build parking capacity. No one's arguing it's not. However, I would just put forth that the cost of the community of not sustaining a healthy economic activity and growth downtown far exceeds this $20 million. This is the cost of doing business. And the DDA has pointed out correctly, and this was supported by what we've heard about how these surface lots are now being viewed, that future, well, in addition to the future development of, in downtown, eliminating capacity in surface lots, this does support the argument that this is really just to maintain the system. And that is even more accurate if the desire is for affordable housing, and if that desire is realized downtown. And then lastly, I would just point to the email that we all received today, an informative email from the Old Fourth Ward neighbors regarding the parking situation near downtown. Obviously, it's very challenging now. It's likely to get worse. We're also hearing more and more from people who've recently moved downtown, sharing how difficult it is to find any on-street parking. And so the point is, we have a system now that's at capacity, both downtown and near downtown. And I just think that, there's nothing to prohibit us from supporting this and then working on these other issues that we should be working on in concert with this, addressing the zoning ordinance concern that's been raised and the other issues that have been raised. You'd have to work with various groups to get park and ride lots outside of town. We don't really have control over that the way we'd like to. So obviously, I'm hoping that my colleagues will support this.
Thank you. Well, I'm disappointed in my colleagues not joining my call to postpone this. It's really unfortunate. I don't ask a whole lot from my colleagues typically, and I asked for 2 months. That's all I asked, 2 months, so we can work on these policy differences. I was elected on reform. I'm going to continue with DDA reform, and that's what I'm trying to do here. And apparently, we're not all in concert with that. I asked for a couple of things to be addressed and fixed. The Old Fourth Ward is over a half mile away from this parking garage. We might as well be talking about, Burns Park. It's just, and then to also, you know, it's amazing that we can talk about affordable housing in this argument. If you want affordable housing, build affordable housing, not parking garages. I mean, so it's just for me, it's hard for me to accept, you know, and hard for me to look at people in the eye and tell them that we're building 375 parking spaces for affordable housing. Believe me. Like, where is the logic in that? I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. I mean, I know we're studying these other lots and we're studying these other properties, but we haven't gotten the results on them. We don't know what we're looking at yet. And to be honest with you, I thought all eyes were on the Y lot. I mean, that's where my attention is. It's not, it should be on the Y lot, we just spent $75,000 to study it. And it's good to do our due diligence and look at other properties. But if we want affordable housing, let's quit talking about parking, whether it's core or whether it's this, and just build affordable housing. There's nothing in the pipeline with these surface lots. These surface lots have been surface lots since I got to town in 1987. Guess what's happened in 35 years? Nothing. So, you know, it's just disappointing that I couldn't get the postponement to address the concerns that I have with the wait lists and having 2020 technology with those, and is addressing our zoning ordinances that don't socialize the risks and privatize the profits. You know, that's what this is. I mean, it's corporate welfare at the government level. And, you know, I know there's some other issues, whether it's traffic and climate and all this other stuff, but these are basic core principles that I find that I need to address. Someone needs to bring this up. We are socializing the risk, privatizing the profits.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also disappointed that we didn't postpone. I think I was a vote that wanted to be a yes, but at this point can't. I think, like I said earlier, the one compelling case to me for this expansion would be the opportunity to build affordable housing on lots without creating a detrimental situation for business owners downtown. And I think we have to have those conversations together. I think that's one conversation, it can't be two, because down the road, let's say we build this 370 plus parking spaces, and by the time we get around to the affordable housing sometime next year, hopefully, even that won't be enough. We have to be showing that connection in our communications to the business community and the downtown community. And I just, it's hard. I want to create these opportunities for the surface lots, but not without some assurance that those opportunities would be used for affordable housing. So I can't vote yes tonight.
Further discussion? Councilmember Grant.
I think I just want to respond to why I didn't think postponing 2 months was a good idea. I just didn't think that it was realistic to get that much done in such a short amount of time. As, you know, for those of us who've sat here, we know that government moves slowly, and it wasn't totally clear to me what the ask was for what we were going to get done in 2 months. So that's why I didn't support it. It wasn't about not wanting to have time for discussions. I think we heard a lot of good ideas. I'm completely in favor of looking at, you know, some of these ideas that Councilmember Hayner brought up, for example, about how we structure fees and how we change wait lists. But I don't think the zoning issue, just knowing how long that zoning takes to get done and knowing, you know, the responses that I've heard from people in the community about when we make zoning changes, particularly with the master plan on the horizon, and how can you be suggesting something like T1 zoning, for example, even though we've been talking about transit-oriented development, what seems like forever to me. So, so a lot of these issues are conflated to me because I've lived through a lot of how people have made the connections, and I just don't realistically see how having, you know, that we're gonna make a zoning change about downtown parking that I personally don't think is a good idea at all, to have D1 buildings have to create their own parking. I actually think that's a horrible idea. But that's not something that we can make quickly and without a lot of community conversation and input. So, so to me, that's not January, and that's why I didn't support it. It was definitely not due to a lack of respect for the request.
Further discussion? Councilmember Bannister.
I'm gonna have to vote yes on this parking structure because I know that's what the Ward 1 immediate neighbors are wanting me to do. But I want to say that I am very, very upset to have to do it. I do feel, I agree with Ollie's and many of these comments around the table about where corporate welfare and that this zero parking for downtown people, downtown developments is unacceptable. So I'm going to continue to work on those zoning changes and try to get there's several vulnerabilities in our zoning that we don't want to wait till the master planning process. We have to look at several of our zoning categories, and this is one of them. This zero parking requirement in D1 and D2 is just a recipe for socializing the parking trouble. So I'm going to vote yes on it, but I'm going to continue to work hard on making development pay for its own stormwater and pay for its own parking and not externalize their costs onto the rest of us. Thanks.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold? Absent. Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Rumlawi?
No.
Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Do we have communications today from our city attorney?
Bill Mayor.
We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of the clerk's report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The clerk's report is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we would be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hi, my name is Ed Vilmetti. I'd like to address council and the mayor regarding planning for next year's budget, specifically the capital improvement plan, very specifically the sidewalk gap piece of that plan. There will hopefully be sufficient funding in the budget to address some of the more egregious needs in our sidewalk network. Things which have been previously referred to as goat paths, which I think is a term that should be retired from use in favor of the notion that these are desire lines where people want to walk and will walk even in cases where the municipality hasn't provided them any affordances for walking. The issue in my neighborhood is the Stimson Street gap. This has been pointed out going back to the South State Street planning process, where there's a gap between, there's a gap in front of relatively low-income housing between the university and the neighborhoods there. It's a gap which has a deep rut in the street, It's a gap near several busy, bus stops. And the way the city currently handles sidewalk gaps is to assume that they should be handled by assessing the nearby property owners, which certainly will bring up some concern that of unfair assessment. And I would simply point out that the needs of addressing these gaps accrue benefits across the entire city. Anything certainly that we can do to minimize the burden on any given parcel owner for not having a sidewalk on their lot, especially long after their parcel was annexed from the township, might be a nice thing to do, but it's much more important to address the gaps themselves and make sure that people don't have to walk in the mud to get to the bus. So, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Adam Oxner. I just wanted to talk about Councilmember Wamlawi's wanting to separate parking from affordable housing discussions, but I think that they're necessarily entwined, and it is a complicated issue, so it's not like building parking will be the only factor in affordable housing, but the zoning ordinances that require parking downtown do increase the pricing of the downtown, or developments downtown, which would work in opposition of affordable housing and in general. And there's a lot of connection between parking and affordable housing because it is a land use issue. So I think that to totally dismiss it from the discussion is maybe not advised in the future discussions of parking, although its weight in discussion can be argued, but it is important to the discussion of affordable housing. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Kenneth Bryan with the Medicine Man of Ann Arbor. We are at risk of potentially losing our Ann Arbor Provisioning Center permit, and I'm here to address our concerns with our request to amend our location. The City of Ann Arbor just recently approved an SCU cap to mirror the number of Provisioning Center permits available. The new language was put into the ordinance changes proposed to City Council on October 7th, 2019. The City Council did adopt the changes, and it became effective 4 days ago, October 17th. We made our request to amend our location of our permit as the ordinance describes in December of 2018 and again in August of 2019. There was not an SCU cap in place at the time of our request to move. Councilman Jack Eating at a city council meeting prior to adopting the city ordinance changes, he confirmed that the city council at the time had not adopted the SCU cap. Councilwoman Elizabeth Nelson then followed up and asked, was the SCU cap currently a policy? Brett Leonard responded that the SCU cap is a proposed ordinance changes. The SCU cap was not adopted by the city council at the time of our request. Councilwoman Ann Bannister heard our plea and asked the city to look into what happened with our request and to provide any remedies for our situation. We thank Councilwoman Ann Bannister for seeking assistance and clarity regarding our request to amend our location. We also thank Councilman Jack Eating and Councilwoman Elizabeth Nelson for taking the time to address our SCU concerns. We'd also like to thank all of the city council members, the assistant city attorney Christine Larcombe, Derek Delacour, Brett Leonard, and Gio Thatcher, who have also taken the time to look into this situation. We had a number of Ann Arbor residents write and call our city council members and others for assistance. We've turned in hundreds of signatures as well from Ann Arbor residents who do not want to see us lose our license as a result of unintended consequences by the novelty of creating a new ordinance or regulatory framework for our industry. We ask that our request to relocate be approved because there was not an SCU cap in effect at the time of our request, and we should have been allowed to move under the ordinance. Thank you much for your time and consideration. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications today from council? Do we have a closed session today?
That's okay.
Oh, my apologies.
That's all right. That's okay. We have a closed session.
We do have a closed session under the Open Meetings Act. Two items from pending litigation. Number one, the Peters Building Company versus the City of Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County Circuit Court case. Second, the state versus and other intervening plaintiffs versus Gelman, Washtenaw County Circuit Court case. Under Section D, purchase of property under the Open Meetings Act, and Section H, material exempt by state law, which includes written attorney-client communication. Sorry about that.
May I have a motion, please, to go into closed session on the basis previously stated? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Mallon. Discussion? Councilmember Hayner.
I would just like to add that I have a question about pending litigation, the Gelman suit, if we could add that to our conversation in closed session.
That was the second.
That was the second one?
Yes.
I didn't hear all you said, so apologies.
No worries. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold, absent. Councilmember Lum,
Yes?
Councilmember Graham.
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Yes.
Mayor Taylor.
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Malawi.
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner,
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister. Yes. Motion carries.
We're in closed session.